Adventurous kids explore with education and learning what a wild life is in the Everglades. I want to explore the Museum of Discovering Science. What plants do butterflies like? I want to know about Key West. Adventurous kids, learning and fun. Adventurous kids!
Today I'm going to tell you about architecture. The science and art of designing buildings is known as architecture. People who practice architecture are called architects. Architects express an artistic version due to size, shape, color, materials, and style of a building's elements. But unlike painters or sculptors who can create a work of art for its own sake, architects must design a building for a specific purpose. The architect can produce a work of art, but it must also be functional. Great architecture has been around since ancient times. Buildings tell us a lot about what is important in people's lives. In the past, people built huts and wood houses to protect themselves from the weather. For safety, they were often close together. Great civilizations like the ancient Egyptians built large temples and structures like the Great Pyramids of Giza. The ancient Greeks and Romans made what we now call classical architecture. The ancient Greeks had a unique style of architecture that is still copied today in government buildings and major monuments throughout the world. Greek architecture is known for tall columns, intricate detail, symmetry, harmony, and balance. The Greeks built all sorts of buildings. The main examples of Greek architecture that survive today are the large temples that they built to their gods. The Greeks built most of their temples and government buildings in three types of styles: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. These styles, also called orders, were reflected in the type of columns they used. Most of all, the columns had groups down the sides called fluting. This gave the columns a feeling of depth and balance. The most famous temple of ancient Greece is the Parthenon, located on the Acropolis in the city of Athens. It was built for the goddess Athena. The Romans were excellent engineers and builders. Roman engineering had a large influence on Roman architecture. Arches were used a lot due to their strength. The Romans also used domes as they enabled them to build large ceilings with wide open spaces. The Colosseum in Rome is a great example of Roman engineering and construction. The Colosseum was a large outdoor stadium that could seat around 50,000 people for various forms of entertainment such as gladiator games, mock battles, and dramas. The huge Colosseum is a freestanding and built with multiple arches to give it strength. Much of it still stands today, although earthquakes have knocked portions of it down. Gothic architecture is a way of planning and designing buildings that developed in Western Europe in the late Middle Ages. The important single feature of Gothic architecture is the pointed arch. Other important features are the ribbed vault, flank buttress, and windows with patterns of stone lace called tracery. Many of the great cathedrals, abbeys, and churches of Europe are Gothic architecture. It is also architecture of many castles, palaces, town halls, universities, and also some houses. The Cologne Cathedral is one of the largest cathedrals built in Gothic style in the world. It was not finished until the 1800s. One of the most famous examples of French Gothic architecture is the Notre Dame in Paris, France. Renaissance architecture started in Italy in the early 1400s and spread throughout Europe during the 1500s. Architects studied Roman ruins and tried to model their designs on classical buildings. Some features they were columns, arches, and domes. Perhaps the most famous building built during the Renaissance is Basilica of St. Peter. The Sistine Chapel is another example of Renaissance architecture. Baroque architecture began in Rome during the early 1600s. The type of Baroque building featured curved forms, an extravagant and intricate use of columns, and ornate sculptures and paintings for decoration. Some of the examples of buildings with the Baroque style are the Palace of Versailles in France, St. Paul's Cathedral in London, St. Peter's Square in Vatican, and Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna. Neoclassical architecture is the revival of classical architecture. This resulted in 18th century buildings somewhat resembling Greek and Roman temples. Neoclassical architecture is defined by clean, elegant lines, uncluttered appearance, freestanding columns, and massive buildings. Some of the more popular examples are the Bank of England building in Liverpool, the White House in the United States, and the General Post Office in Dublin. Victorian architecture is a style of architecture that refers to buildings that were constructed during the reign of England's Queen Victoria. The Victorian style was applied to residential house designs during the Industrial Revolution. Many homes in the UK, US, and Australia utilize this style. One characteristic that most Victorian homes share is the dollhouse look, having elaborate trims, vivid colors, and asymmetrical designs. Some of the most prominent Victorian buildings are the Palace of Westminster and Royal Albert Hall in London, Osborne House in the Isle of Wight, Balmoral Castle in Scotland, and Postcard Row in San Francisco, California. Modern architecture is a minimalist style that was practiced by many architects until after World War II. Modern architecture is characterized by its simple form, clean structure, lack of ornamentation, and function over form. This style also took advantage of the advances in steel, glass, and concrete. Some of the best-known architects of the 20th century flourished during this era, including Frank Lloyd Wright and E. Corbusier. It follows that some of the most iconic examples of modern architecture include Frank Lloyd Wright's Fallingwater House in the United States, Le Corbusier's Villa Savoy in France, and Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's Neue National Gallery in Berlin. Postmodern architecture began in the 1960s. It incorporated artistic ornamentation and decorative elements into the building's facade, as opposed to just the clean lines upheld by modernist styles. Postmodern architecture was a mixture of architectural styles. The Vanna Venturi House in Pennsylvania, USA, designed by Warford Venturi, is one of the first prominent structures of the postmodern architecture movement. Two famous structures designed by architect Frank Gehry, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, and the Dancing House in Peru, are also notable examples. Neo-futurism is an architectural style that is seen as a more idealistic approach to the future. The designs increasingly take advantage of new technologies to build seemingly impossible forms and innovative structures that have never been done before. Neo-futurist architecture has identified with structures that seem to defy natural physics, which were only previously seen in sci-fi movies. One of the best-known architects of neo-futurist architecture is the groundbreaking Iraq British architect Zaha Hadid. She was known for her distinctive projects, including the new Riverside Museum and Glasgow Stribberine Circular Gallery in Hyde Park, the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Style in Japan, the 2020 FIFA World Cup Stadium in Qatar, and the Hyder Alavi Cultural Center in Azerbaijan. Here are some famous architects: Antonio Gaudi, Frank Lloyd Wright, Frank Gehry, Philip Johnson, Daniel Burham, and Zaha Hadid. Thanks for watching this Adventurous Kids episode.
did you learn today?
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!
What was the most interesting fact?
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!
Adventurous Kids!